Wildlife Photographer of the Year. Selected from 49,957 entries across 95 countries, these 100 images tell powerful stories from across the 7 continents about the wildlife with which we share this planet. Reporting from the front line of the planetary emergency, these photographers provide a glimpse into the beautiful yet fragile natural world. Living dangerously. Jerry spent a day squatting under spider webs, his camera pointed up to the sky. The light silhouetted the orb weaver, while a hint of flashlight lit the dewdrop spider in the foreground. The relationship between the spiders is complex and may work to their mutual benefit. Dewdrop spiders attract more prey into the orb weaver's webs, but some species of dewdrop spiders are known to feed on the orb weaver host when it mounts and cannot defend itself. Mason bee at work. Solvin knew that the bee was memorizing landmarks around the nest so that it could find it again. So as not to disorient it, he edged his equipment closer each time it left. After 2 hours, the bee was using his equipment as a landmark. 2 coloured mason bees use snail shells for egg laying. They pack the shell with pollen and nectar for their larvae, then seal it with grass and sticky saliva. Humans sometimes consider snails to be pests, but this species could not survive without them. Spinning a rainbow. Night after night, Vinoda waited in his garden for the Neoscona spiders to spin their webs. Once they started adding sticky spiral threads to their supporting spokes, he worked quickly. Illuminating the scene with a torch, Vinoda used 2 exposures to reveal the spiders' markings. The spiders spinning their silky traps leave a ghost-like impression each time they pause between the spokes. Iridescent colours are caused by moisture on the silk reflecting the torchlight, much like how rainbows are created by raindrops and sunlight. The tourism bulldozer. To reach a point from where he could launch his drone, Fernando was guided through 4 kilometres, 2.5 miles of underground cave system. The result of his challenging trek was this image. The government-funded railway line connecting tourist destinations brings economic benefit to Mexico's southeast, but it also fragments ecosystems, threatens protected reserves and archaeological sites, and impacts indigenous peoples. While trains are a more environmentally friendly form of transport, conservationists warn of devastating consequences. The face of the persecuted. Neil framed this fox's permanently exposed teeth and eye as it peered out from his makeshift den in a rehabilitation centre. This image is part of Neil's 9-year project photographing the complex relationship the British have with the red fox. Since 2005, in England and Wales, it has been illegal to poison foxes, block or destroy foxholes, or use dogs to hunt them. The injuries suffered by this animal were likely inflicted by dogs illegally sent into the fox's den to flush it out. Humanity's biggest hole. Garth wanted to show the devastated landscape of the copper mine, contrasting the gutted mountainside with the pristine beauty of the opposite peaks. Lit by the early morning sun, this image does not show the turbulence Garth endured in his light hawk plane. This mine historically contaminated a local aquifer with acids, sulfates, and metals, which led to a multi-billion-dollar clean-up operation. While the controversy around the environmental legacy of the mine is ongoing, today the owner aims to highlight its new environmental credentials. Tapir in trouble. Alejandro has been photographing tapirs for 3 years and says that the practice of hunting with dogs is increasing. Tapirs are often killed for meat, but this time the dogs were called off and the tapir returned to the forest. Bayard's tapirs can be found from Mexico to Colombia, and they are now classified as endangered. Hunting has been reported to have a notable effect in some tapir populations, significantly increasing their chance of becoming extinct in the near future. War cub. Michel documented efforts to evacuate animals, including wild animals, in private ownership such as tigers, from across war-torn Ukraine. The night changed me, he says. Hearing the cry of a lion still in the trunk made me decide to help with the next evacuation run. Many of the animals were rescued from fighting hotspots in eastern Ukraine in 2022. At the Polish border, the animals were recrafted and rushed to Poznan Zoo, then on to sanctuaries in Europe. More than 200 animals have since been saved. Tiger Run. As a conservation volunteer and a wildlife photographer, Najib was asked to help when a tiger emerged from the Orang National Park and found itself in a field with 100 or so people. The tiger panicked, and so did the villagers, shouting and throwing stones. India has roughly 65% of the world's wild tigers. Lack of natural prey and the temptation of livestock lures tigers into farmland. Showing locals how best to tackle such situations and offering payment for livestock loss are critical. Burning issue. This jaguar was rescued after devastating wildfires swept through western Brazil in 2020. Third-degree burns on its paws and stomach destroyed tendons and exposed bone. It was given stem cell injections to speed up regeneration of new tissue. The wildfires were started during an extreme dry season drought by landowners clearing land mainly for pasture. The wildfires impacted nearly a third of the entire Pantanal, the world's largest wetland. An estimated 17 million animals died. Ghost cat. As this South China tiger paced around, Singheng noticed the contrast between the pattern of its fur and the bars of the cage. Now extinct in the wild due to the decades of persecution, this individual is one of the fewer than 200 in zoos across China. It is believed that all captive South China tigers are descendants of 6 wild cats. Inbreeding and crossbreeding with other tiger species means it is now unlikely that any South China tigers will be successfully reintroduced back into the wild. Fight to the death. The collision shattered the elephant's hip beyond repair, and it had been killed. Jasper, who was in the park on a different assignment, witnessed the episode. Despite the park director's efforts to get the train company to slow trains, there are regular wildlife train collisions in Lopere National Park, including up to 20 incidents with the elephants a year. Train transport manganese from Moanda mine, which holds 25% of known reserves. Manganese is a metal used in iron and steel production. Spitting out water babies. Thomas noticed little fountains of water in the river shallows. Making the most of the limited equipment he had brought on holiday, his wife held a torch to backlight the scene. In spring, thick-shelled river mussels squirt water containing hundreds of larvae from their raised shells, which attracts fish. The larvae attach to the fish's gills, where they live harmlessly until they become juvenile mussels. Numbers in Europe have declined by 90% since the 1970s, mainly due to the degradation of waterways. Lights fantastic. Cerium combined 15 19-second exposures to show the firefly flashes produced over 16 minutes in the forests near his hometown. The firefly flashes start at twilight, with just a few before the frequency increases and they pulse in unison like a wave across the forest. Fireflies, which are in fact beetles, are famous for attracting mates using bioluminescence. Darkness is a necessary ingredient in the success of this process. Light pollution affects many nocturnal animals and creatures, but fireflies are especially susceptible. The Tadpole Banquet. The drama unfolded near Juan's home when a newly fledged sparrow launched itself from a nest on his neighbour's roof and fell into a nearby pond, where it drowned. Juan had to pick his moment to show the tadpole formation and the sparrow's eye. Common toad tadpoles have varied diets consisting of algae, vegetation, and tiny swimming invertebrates. As they grow larger, they become more carnivorous, so when a banquet like this arrives, they take full advantage. Clash of the Titans. Tom's intentions as his dinghy drifted towards the beach was to get close enough to photograph the two Komodo dragons resting on the sand. But suddenly they reared up and clashed, a dispute that was over in seconds. With fewer than 1,400 adult dragons left in the world, and their range limited to a handful of Indonesian islands, the Komodo dragon is now listed as endangered as rising sea levels submerge its habitat and threaten its survival. Getting a head start. David's challenge was to create a memorable image of a familiar animal in a much photographed location, Kenya's Maasai Mara. The low angle separated out his subject from the grass. Using black and white highlighted the striking combination of shapes, spots, and stripes. A scrum of spotted hyenas can devour a zebra in less than half an hour. They are good hunters as well as scavengers. Their jaws are powerful enough to crush large skulls, and their stomachs can digest bones. Net loss. Shulin often goes to Poyang Lake in China to photograph animals. On this day, he took a boat out and saw the consequences of a poacher's illegal set mist net. Inside was an ensnared and long dead gull, likely a black-headed gull. Shulin's image highlights an illegal practice that has since been stopped. Many other threats remain, though. Dredging, drought, and reduced food supplies have all impacted the animals that rely on the lake, many of which are critically endangered. Pool of Wonder. Highlighting the beauty and fragility of these underwater worlds is important to Stephen. He thoroughly researched lenses and lighting, taking great care not to disturb the sediments or animals in this underwater world. Shallow seasonal pools are ideal amphibian nurseries because of the absence of predators such as fish, but these habitats are still impacted by environmental change. Less predictable spring rains are also causing pools to dry up before the young salamanders can fully develop and live on the land. Death cycle. Piotr had tried for many years to use his drone to witness the drama of the ending of a dry season in Gorangosa. Here a waterbuck died when it became stuck in the mud, and while African sharp-toothed catfish wait for the rains, some scavenge meat from the antelope. Shark-toothed catfish are omnivorous and can survive for several days out of water, and thanks to an air-breathing organ in their gills. If they do eventually perish while they wait for the rains to return, they provide food for other species. Ashes of a wetland. Raj had documented the growth and burning of rubbish in this marsh for several years. Having seen the area from the ground and been concerned by the annual decrease in birds, he used a drone to see the scale of what was happening from above. The Palikarani marsh in India was designated as a Ramsar wetland site of international importance in 2022. Despite this, every day tons of rubbish from the city of Chennai are dumped and burned there. The Dead River. To find time when lower air pollution allowed a clear view, Joanne returns to the scene over several days. His image documents one of the most polluted rivers in the world and illustrates the growing global issue of river pollution. Plastic rubbish, human waste, agricultural fertilizers, and factory waste are suffocating the Siliwan River. As a result, Jakarta's residents are having to use groundwater for drinking water. This has resulted in widespread subsidence, and the city is now sinking. Rock Idol. After several weeks of searching, Isaac found this river chub's nest. Lying in the stream, he could just make out an orange glow, and as he approached, colourful fish appeared out of the haze. During spring spawning, male chubs carry rocks and pebbles sometimes as far as 10 metres, 33 feet, to form a mound among which the eggs can be laid, sheltered from currents and predators. These nests are also important for other minnow species who rely on them to keep their eggs safe. Coral connections. Alex is particularly fond of gobies, which are normally skittish, but he was determined to picture more than one in the frame. Unexpected was the copepod parasite on one fish. Capturing the vibrant contrasting colours meant holding steady in the current to get a long enough exposure. Ghost gobies use Gorganian sea fans as a refuge or feeding platform and perfectly blend into their surroundings. Coral reefs support a diversity of interconnected species but are at risk due to the warming seas of climate change. All aboard. Georgian found this trio while diving in search of migrating zooplankton. Dodging deadly jellyfish tentacles, he managed to perfect the lighting and frame these three very different species as they emerged from the darkness. The Karadgid fish in the umbrella-shaped body of the jellyfish may have been killed by the powerful stings of the box jellyfish. Argonauts often cling to the jellyfish to save energy, or perhaps to eat them or seek protection from predators. The Young Challenger. The young southern right whale reached out for Philip, who was photographing under special permit. Quick reactions averted a more dangerous collision and allowed him to frame eye contact with his bold subject. Rich in oil, these whales were considered easier to hunt than other whales as they were slow-moving in coastal waters and floated when harpooned. Since hunting ceased in the 1960s, their numbers have been recovered from near extinction. Hippo Nursery. For over 2 years, Mike has been visiting the hippos in this lake and knew they were accustomed to his boat. He spent just 20 seconds underwater with them, enough time to get this image from a safe distance and to avoid alarming the mother. Hippos produce one calf every 2 or 3 years. Their slow-growing population is particularly vulnerable to habitat degradation, drought, and illegal hunting for meat and ivory from their teeth. Prize catch. Jeff had spent days watching fishers bring their catch to shore surrounded by birds trying to get their share. The fish were prepared at sea, then loaded onto trucks early in the morning when this photograph was taken. Artisan fishing provides vital employment opportunities for people living around Ecuador's eastern Pacific waters. This is small in scale compared to the industrial-scale fishing undertaken by international fleets. However, artisan fishing does still have an impact as marine mammals can be entangled in their nets. Big Blue. Ralph encountered this blue whale, one of 3, as it surfaced to take a breath. Its great length was highlighted by the more than meter-wide, nearly 4-foot wingspan of an overhead fulmar. Ralph stayed with the group as they joined other blue whales to feed and socialize. An estimated 2,000 blue whales, around 1/5 of the global population, feed in the waters off California. While numbers are rising, the main threats are plastic pollution, ship strikes, and warming oceans impacting the availability of their main food source, krill. Storm warning. On a calm and sunny August day in 2022, Brian sailed through the Inner Hebrides. Suddenly, the sky darkened. A thunderstorm was brewing. He had time to frame the brooding sky before his boat raced for shelter. In 2022, the UK experienced record temperatures that exceeded 40 Celsius, 104 Fahrenheit, creating conditions for storms that are usually more commonplace in the tropics. Climate change is expected to increase their frequency. The 10 hottest years on record for the UK have been in the last 20 years. Last gasp. Lying on its side in the surf, this orca had only a short time left to live. Initially rescued, it soon was stranded again on the beach and died. A study later revealed that not only was it severely malnourished, but it was also extremely sick. Research shows that orcas in European waters have the world's highest concentrations of polychlorinated biphenyls. These banned chemicals can persist for many years in marine food webs, weakening immune systems and reducing breeding success in whales, porpoises, and dolphins. The dormouse ladder. Dormice are regularly nocturnal inhabitants of Anton's garden in Wiesbaden in Germany, and he decided to photograph them climbing a ladder they regularly used. After Anton had waited many nights, one finally paused on a step, encouraged by a dap of peanut butter. The tough tail and black face markings identify this creature as a garden dormouse. Historically common across mainland Europe, over the past 30 years garden dormice have disappeared from as much as 50% of their former range. Exactly why remains unclear. Lynx lookout. The lynx had passed close by to Andreas, seemingly unfazed by his presence. More than once he has looked me in the eyes and continued on his way very calmly, says Andreas. He knows this male well. At mating times it often follows a particular female. During lynx mating season, males can be seen patrolling the territories of females. In 2002, there were fewer than 100 lynx left in the Sierra de Andorra. Conservation efforts boosted the population to more than 1,000 in 2020, and numbers continue to rise. Starry flight. Setting out on this crystal clear starry night, Ismail planned to photograph the Milky Way. The summer air was filled with insects drawn to torches, and these were attracting hungry bats which were becoming closer and closer. Bats live in nearly every habitat on Earth and make up 1/5 of all land-based mammal species. They are becoming endangered due to habitat loss, which in turn poses a threat to plants, as bats play a key role in pollination and seed dispersal. The catwalk. Shazwat was on a trip to Mara when he heard that a leopard had been spotted nearby. After he spent many hours in the vehicle, searching and waiting, the leopard appeared and Shazwat quickly changed lenses and settings to obtain this elegant portrait. Leopards are the smallest of the big cats and they are often seen near water in the Mara. Population numbers are decreasing due to habitat loss, hunting and the decline of their prey. Last breath of autumn. Long fascinated by fungi, Agorastos used this silver photographic umbrella to stop his camera getting wet and covered his carefully positioned flash with a plastic bag. The colourful torches come from refraction of the light passing through the spore-laden air currents and rain. Parasol mushrooms release spores from the gills under their cap. Billions of tiny spores travel, usually unseen, in the air currents. Some will land where there is moisture and food, enabling them to grow networks under the forest floor. Mushroom magic. Intent on revealing the magic of spore dispersal, Agorastus set up umbrellas to minimize airflow, positioned a light and a reflector, and angled his camera to highlight this often unseen action as waves of ethereal dust. Billions of these tiny egg-shaped spores are dispersed by air currents. Reflections on freshwater plants. Usually in May, Casper sets out to photograph the flowers of water violets emerging in a canal near his home, but in 2022 it was a cold spring and none were in bloom. Instead, he used the soft light and ripple of the water to show the plant's underwater world. Widespread in ponds and slow-flowing water, the leaves of water violets either remain submerged or float on the surface. Needing lots of light, they can be outcompeted by other plants if the water becomes too nutrient-rich. The twilight forest. As the sun set, it felt magical in the stone pine forest. I love the science of this forest and the sound of the ocean waves running through it, says Rodemir. He had visited the spot many times hoping for these conditions. Often planted as a windbreak against the onshore breeze, evergreen forests can be a refuge from the heat for animals. Most pine species are fine adapted, but it is uncertain whether they can survive the growing threat of wildfires resulting from new climate change extremes. The Survivor. A glimpse of movement across the treeless tundra caught Mark's eye. Through binoculars he spotted an Arctic fox in its ragged summer coat, backlit by the low midnight sun. Despite missing half a hind leg, it appeared to be doing well. Arctic foxes grow thick white winter coats that usually camouflage well with the white winter snow. Climate change may now bring a mismatch between when snow starts to fall and when the Arctic foxes develop their winter coats. Snow bison. From his vehicle, Max saw the bison start to head downhill towards the road, gathering momentum, and he drew up to give them space to cross. Max framed the bison tightly to create this original composition. Once abundant and wide-ranging across of North America, bison were hunted to near extinction by the late 1800s. Numbers are slowly increasing. but they are now confined to discrete populations, dependent on the conservation management and constrained by land use changes and land ownership. The perfect fit. Moving slowly across the seabed, a horseshoe crab leaves a furrow in the soft mud with its stiff tail. Lorent's dive assistant spotted a double trail in the soft mud and moved quickly to track this pair preparing to mate. During mating, the male horseshoe crab clasps the much larger female with its hooked appendages, and together they move slowly across the seabed. On the shore, the female lays thousands of eggs, which are then fertilized by the male. Afterwards, they return to feed on the mud plains. Below deck, Laurent focused on a horseshoe crab swimming close to the seabed in waters now green with plankton. Following restoration work, he aimed to focus on the side of his subject, though he could not look through the viewfinder. He managed to reveal what was beneath the carapace. Horseshoe crabs are not actually crabs, but are more closely related to spiders and scorpions. Their legs enable them to trot along the seabed and gather food. In adult females, the first two pairs are scissor-like. In females, they are hooked. Shore move. Not built for speed, this horseshoe crab made slow progress towards a small beach where it would scrape holes in the sand to lay eggs. Despite its lack of speed, Laurent still struggled to keep up while swimming through the seagrass meadow. Marine life is safeguarded in the waters of Pangatangalan Island. Elsewhere, human consumption of horseshoe crabs and their eggs and the destruction of spawning habitats and nursery grounds pose threats to this long-lived, slow-growing endangered species. Death is waiting. Pietro approached the stargazer with care so as not to disturb it. Combining the concentrated light from the flash with a slow shutter speed and deliberate movement from his camera, Pietro presents the stargazer lit through a curtain of turquoise water. The stargazer is an ambush predator. It buries itself in the sand by wriggling its body under it is invisible except for its eyes and teeth. Then it lies in wait for small fish and invertebrates. Its coastal habitat is under pressure from erosion and pollution, and it is often caught as bycatch. Owl's Roadhouse. Returning to where he had spotted a barn owl the previous year, Carmel and his father used the family car as a ride. He made the most of the natural light and used long exposure times to capture the light trails of passing traffic. Israel has the densest barn owl population in the world. A national project has provided nesting bones near agricultural fields, encouraging owls to nest near farmland because the owls hunt rodents that eat seeds and crops. This arrangement has reduced the use of pesticides on farms. The golden horseshoe. Laurent focused on the horseshoe crab's golden protective carapace and the tree of juvenile golden trevally poised to dart down for edible morsels ploughed up in its wake. His photograph portrays continuity and the hope for the species' survival, provided by the protected waters of the Pangatalan island. The horseshoe crab's carapace hides 12 appendages. One pair, called the Chalerisae, is used to push food such as small invertebrates or algae into its mouth. Shell life. Laurent used a tiny stick to move mud from beside a resting tri-spine horseshoe crab and found an angle that allowed his lens to see through its legs. Beneath its carapace lies a hidden world. Little is known of the interaction between horseshoe crabs and other species. These lined shrimps sometimes act as cleaners for fish, removing parasites. The horseshoe crab's carapace is also playing host to minute, hair-like polyps or hydroids, which feed on plankton or particles in the water. Star of the Sea. D'Artagnan had set his heart on photographing reef starfish, but it was a challenge to find them. The reef starfish were visible for about 10 minutes, only when the tide was at its lowest, he explains. Then I had to run back and forth between waves. Reef starfish play a vital role in controlling populations of New Zealand green-lipped mussels by feeding on them. Without the carnivorous reef starfish, the mussels could outcompete other species on the shoreline. Life on the edge. After hiking to a vantage point on the cliff top, Amit slowly crept closer, using a wide-angle lens to set the action of two clashing Nubian ibex against the dramatic backdrop. The battle lasted for about 15 minutes before one male surrendered and the pair parted without serious injury. In the run-up to the mating season, part of the male's coat darkens and their neck muscles thicken. Rivals will rise up on their hind legs and ram their heads together. Their horns sometimes break as they collide. Belugas among sea ice. Mark's drone hovered over the ocean. He had just enough battery to get it back to land and could make only an educated guess as to where the whales would surface, so he had to think fast and time things perfectly. Beluga whales spend winter among ice floes in Arctic and subarctic waters. In the warm, shallow waters of sheltered inlets and estuaries, away from predatory orcas, they give birth and nurse their young. Storm Girl. Matthias had come to Iceland to photograph glaciers and the aurora borealis, but found himself distracted as a storm rolled in. Struggling to stand upright in the gale-force winds, he used his telephoto lens to record the power of the moment. The Galcus gull soaring effortlessly between towering waves is one of the largest gull species in the world. These gulls breed among the cliffs and rocky ground of the Arctic coast, though it's predicted that warming temperatures will reduce their range by nearly 50%. Turtle out of water. Michael pulled over on a busy road to rescue this turtle, which had retreated into its shell in the middle of lane traffic. The slow shutter speed blurs the road train, a truck with multiple trailers thundering past. On one side of the road was a dried-up riverbed, on the other a dam trapping water. The turtles and other wildlife often cross busy roads looking for water when streams and rivers dry up in the summer. Face of the forest. Finding hoof prints on the forest track near his campsite, Vishnu waited nearby. An hour later, the tapir appeared. Using a long exposure and torchlight to capture texture and movement, Vishnu framed the tapir's side-turned head as it emerged from the forest. Lowland tapirs rely on the forest for their diet of fruits and other vegetation, and turned tapirs act as seed dispersers. This important relationship is threatened by habitat loss, illegal hunting, and traffic collisions.